Snow fell heavy across the Wyoming territory on Christmas Eve, 1887. The wind pushed the flakes sideways, covering the land in white so thick it seemed to swallow the world. Eli Mercer stood at the frost-covered window of his small cabin, staring at the empty road that disappeared into the storm. His shoulders were tense. His face was tired. Solitude had become his only companion. Behind him, 6-year-old Hannah arranged pine cones on the rough wooden table while humming a soft carol her mother used to sing. 2 years had passed since fever had taken Sarah from them. 2 years of raising a child alone. 2 years of grief that had turned Eli's heart colder than the winter outside. He worked hard. He cared for Hannah, but everything else stayed beyond his fence line. "Papa, do you think she will come today?" Hannah asked quietly. Eli's jaw tightened. 3 months ago, he had answered an advertisement for a mail-order bride, not because he was searching for love. That part of him felt gone. He needed help with the homestead. Hannah needed a woman's presence. Duty had guided his hand, not hope. "The stage is due at noon," he said. "If she is coming, she will be here." Hannah bounced on her toes. "I hope she is kind and pretty and likes Christmas." Eli said nothing. He only hoped she was sturdy and practical, someone who would not expect more than he could give. A knock sounded on the door, sharp and sudden. Hannah gasped. "She is here." Eli's boots felt heavy as he crossed the floor. He paused with his hand on the latch, took a deep breath, then opened the door. A woman stood in the falling snow. Her dress was worn thin. The fabric was patched in several places. Her shoes were so damaged that cloth had been wrapped around the toes to keep the cold out. She held one small carpet bag in both hands. Her skin was pale from travel, but her dark, steady eyes held no shame. Eli's stomach dropped. This was not what he had imagined. "Mr. Mercer," she said softly. "I am Margaret, your bride." Before Eli could find words, Hannah pushed past his legs. "Papa, she is cold. Let her in." Eli looked again at Margaret's thin clothing and the snow gathering on her shoulders. His first instinct was to close the door, not from cruelty but from fear. What had he agreed to? What hardships had pushed this woman into answering his advertisement? But Hannah was already reaching for Margaret's hand. The wind howled between them, carrying snow into the cabin. Margaret stepped forward. The warmth inside melted the flakes on her shoulders like small tears. She stood tall despite her poverty. No apology lived in her posture. Hannah tugged on Eli's sleeve. "Papa, she needs warm coffee." "Hannah," he began, but she was already pulling Margaret toward the fire. "Sit here, Miss Margaret. This is the warmest place. Papa built this fireplace himself. He is very good at building things." Margaret sat down, and exhaustion flickered across her face before she gathered herself again. "Thank you, child," she said gently. "You have your father's kind heart." Eli nearly scoffed. His heart had felt anything but kind for 2 years. Hannah ran to the kitchen and returned with a cup. Eli recognized it at once. Sarah's cup. The chipped one she had loved. "This was Mama's favorite," Hannah explained, as she handed it to Margaret. "She said it had character." Margaret's hands trembled as she accepted it. "Then I am honored to use it." She took a sip, and color slowly returned to her cheeks. Eli watched from the doorway. He studied the careful stitches in her patched dress, the way she held the cup with both hands, the steadiness in her gaze when she noticed him looking. "Mr. Mercer," she said quietly, "I know this is not what you expected." "No," he answered honestly. "It is not." She did not look away. "I can explain my circumstances if you will allow me later." His voice came out sharper than he meant. "Hannah, show Miss Margaret to the spare room. She needs rest." Hannah grabbed Margaret's hand eagerly. "Come on. I helped Papa clean it for you." Their voices drifted down the hall. Eli turned back to the window. The snow was falling harder, covering all tracks. If he was going to send her back, the decision had to be quick. Soon the roads would be blocked. From the spare room he heard Hannah's happy chatter and Margaret's patient replies. Then, something else. Hannah's laughter, a sound he had barely heard in months. His hands clenched at his sides. One night, he told himself, she could stay through Christmas. Then he would decide. But deep down he already knew something had shifted. Evening settled over the cabin like a thick blanket. The fire crackled warmly. Hannah sat at the table showing Margaret her bird feathers. "Papa found this one by the creek," she said proudly. Eli kept to the kitchen. He pretended to prepare supper, but he was really keeping distance. He could hear every word they exchanged. Margaret's voice was warm. Hannah's was bright. "Miss Margaret, can you help me hang my stocking? Mama always helped me." "Of course, little one. Show me where." Eli finally turned. Margaret steadied Hannah as she hung a small knitted stocking. Margaret smiled softly. "Perfect." Hannah stepped back, then spoke with childlike truth. "Miss Margaret, Papa does not smile anymore. Not since Mama went to heaven. Do you think he will smile again?" Eli froze. Margaret knelt. "Grief is love, with nowhere to go, little one. Your Papa's heart is full of love for you. Sometimes we forget how to show it, but it is there," Hannah whispered. "I hope he remembers." Eli turned away, unable to listen a second longer. Later that night he escaped to the barn. The cold hit him hard. He leaned over his workbench, the same place where he had once carved toys for Hannah, the same place he had built the cradle Sarah loved. His hands had been still for 2 years, his heart even longer. He looked back at the warm light glowing through the cabin window. Inside, a woman in rags was bringing life into his home. His daughter was laughing, and he was hiding in the cold. "Sarah," he whispered into the dark, "what am I doing?" When he returned to the cabin, Margaret had banked the fire and left a lamp glowing for him. Hannah's mended stocking hung neatly by the fireplace. For the first time in 2 years, Eli felt the weight of his loneliness as something that might be able to change. Christmas morning arrived bright and cold, sunlight turning the snow outside into glittering fields of white. Hannah woke first, rushing to the fireplace with tiny, excited footsteps. Eli heard her delighted gasp and quickly got out of bed. He found her holding her stocking with both hands, her eyes wide with wonder. Inside was a small wooden bird carved from scrap wood. Its wings were delicate. Its head was turned as if listening. It looked almost alive. "Papa, look what was in my stocking," Hannah said breathlessly. Margaret stepped from her room, her threadbare dress neat and her hair brushed smooth. She smiled at the little girl. "It is a chickadee," she explained. "They stay through the winter while other birds fly away." Hannah hugged the bird to her chest. "Did you make this, Miss Margaret?" "I did," she said softly. "I hope you like it." "I love it," Hannah cried. She ran and wrapped her arms around Margaret's waist. "Thank you." Margaret held her close, her eyes warm. When she looked up at Eli, he saw hesitation. Had she done too much? Had she crossed a line? He felt his throat tighten and managed a stiff nod. "It was kind of you," he said. The words felt rough, but true. The days that followed settled into a gentle rhythm. Margaret rose early each morning with quiet steps, already preparing coffee when Eli came in from chores. Though her clothing was worn, she carried herself with dignity. She patched drafts in the cabin, organized the pantry, and stretched their food supply with careful skill that spoke of hard experience. She worked with steady patience, never waiting for thanks. Hannah followed her everywhere. "Miss Margaret, teach me how to make biscuits. Miss Margaret, can we sew a sampler today? Miss Margaret, tell me about Missouri." Eli watched from a distance. He spoke little, kept to his chores, and stayed guarded. But even then he noticed things he could not ignore. The cabin felt warmer. Hannah slept better. The restless nights filled with tears had quietly ended. Margaret's presence seemed to fill empty spaces without taking anything away. One evening, Hannah proudly showed him a sampler she had been stitching with Margaret's help. The words were crooked but heartfelt. "Home is where love grows." "Miss Margaret helped me, Papa," Hannah said with a smile. "She is a good teacher. Did you know she taught school in Missouri?" Eli looked at the sampler. then at his daughter's hopeful face. "It is fine work, Hannah," he said. Hannah beamed. "Miss Margaret says, I have patient hands like Mama did." For the first time, the mention of Sarah brought something other than pain. It brought a quiet warmth, like a memory easing into place. That night, after Hannah went to bed, Eli walked to his workbench in the barn. His carving tools sat dusty and unused. His hands hovered over them before finally picking them up. Slowly, carefully, he began shaping a piece of pine. At first, the work felt stiff, unfamiliar. But after a while, the grooves started to form naturally. By lantern light, a simple wooden flower began to take shape. A small, curved stem. 5 thin petals. Not perfect, but honest. He told himself it was for Hannah. But when he finished, he set it aside and wondered if Margaret might find it beautiful. Days passed. The second week of January arrived with bitter cold. Eli rode to the north pasture for work. When he returned at dusk, his breath fogging in the icy air, he found Margaret and Hannah sitting at the table together. Their heads were bent over Hannah's reading book. "Sound it out, little one," Margaret encouraged. "You know this word." Hannah traced the letters. "Free. Freedom." "Excellent," Margaret said. "You are reading so well." Eli hung up his coat and paused, watching. Margaret's patience seemed endless. Her praise was warm and steady. Hannah looked proud and confident under her guidance. After supper, Hannah fell asleep on the rug near the fire. Eli carried her to bed while Margaret cleaned the kitchen. When he returned, she sat near the fire, mending with smooth, practiced stitches. Her threadbare dress and patched sleeves did not hide her grace. Eli sat across from her with a cup of coffee. Silence settled between them, but it felt different than before. Not sharp, not cold, more like something waiting to be spoken. Finally, he broke the quiet. "You were a school teacher." Margaret's needle paused. "Yes. In Missouri. How did you come to answer my advertisement and such?" He stopped, unable to finish the sentence without sounding cruel. "Such poverty," she finished gently. "No anger. No shame. Only truth." He nodded. She set her mending aside. Her hands rested in her lap as she spoke. "My father was a merchant. A respected man. When he died last spring, I learned he had debts he never shared. Everything went to paying them. The house, the furniture, even my mother's jewelry. I kept nothing." Her voice trembled once, then steadied. A widow with no family was not considered fit to teach. They gave my position to a married woman. She looked straight into Eli's eyes. "I could have borrowed fine clothes to impress you. I could have hid my true condition. But I will not begin a life on deception. You deserve the truth. All of it." Eli sat back, stunned, not by her poverty, but by her courage, her honesty, her dignity. His wife, Sarah, had carried that same strength. "That took courage," he said at last. "More than most men I know." Margaret's expression softened. "Thank you." Their quiet moment deepened, like two people beginning to see each other clearly for the first time. The next day, Hannah tripped while playing outside and scraped her knee on a stone. Margaret reached her before Eli could. She knelt calmly, cleaned the wound, soothed Hannah's cries, and soon had the little girl laughing about her new battle scar. Eli watched, his throat tightening. This woman in rags had more worth than most folks he had ever known. That night, Eli left the carved wooden flower on the kitchen table. By morning, it was gone. Later, he found it sitting on the windowsill in Margaret's room, catching the soft winter light. Neither of them said a word, but something small and fragile had passed between them, something warm. The third week of January brought a trip to town for supplies. The general store was crowded, warm from the stoves. Eli had barely stepped inside when Widow Carson and her group of gossiping friends descended upon him. "Word is you brought home your mail-order bride," Widow Carson said with a sharp smile. Eli stiffened. "I did." She leaned closer. "And she arrived in rags, did she not?" Her companions whispered. "Such a shame. A man like you could have done better. What kind of breeding produces such poverty?" Eli paid for his supplies and left quickly. But their voices cut deep. Their judgment followed him all the way home. When he reached the cabin, he found Margaret and Hannah dusted with flour, shaping dough into small rolls. Both looked up with bright smiles, and guilt struck him like cold wind. "Papa, we are making cinnamon rolls," Hannah cheered. "That is fine," he said sharply without meaning to. Margaret's smile faded. She sensed the shift at once. She lowered her eyes, but her posture stayed calm and dignified. Over the next 2 days, Eli withdrew. His words grew short. His distance grew wider. Margaret tried gently to speak with him, but he gave little in return. The warmth they had built began to freeze. Hannah felt it most. She grew quiet and worried. On the third evening, as Eli reached the hallway, he heard Hannah's trembling voice from her bedroom. "Miss Margaret," she whispered, "you are not going to leave us too, are you, like Mama did?" The pain in her small voice made Eli stop cold. Margaret's reply was soft and steady. "I am here now, little one. I am here." But even Hannah heard the sadness behind her words. That night, Eli walked into the freezing barn, his heart a storm of doubt and regret. Widow Carson's cruel words battled against what he knew in his bones. Margaret's worth fought against judgment he should have ignored. He sat in the darkness until moonlight spilled through the window. His father's old Bible lay on the workbench. Sarah's ribbon still marked a page. He opened it with shaking hands. In the margin, in Sarah's familiar handwriting, were words she had once written for him. "Worth is measured by character, not circumstance. Remember this, my love." His breath caught. Sarah had always seen deeper than surfaces. Through the barn window he heard faint singing. Margaret's voice, soft, tender, singing Hannah to sleep. Eli stood and crossed the snowy yard. He stepped inside the cabin and moved quietly toward the hallway. There he saw them. Margaret sat at the bedside, smoothing Hannah's hair as she slept. Hannah's small hand held Margaret's fingers as if they were lifelines. Lamplight fell gently over both of them. "Miss Margaret," Hannah whispered sleepily, "please do not go away." "Hush now, little bird. I am right here." Eli watched from the shadows. Everything became clear. This woman had lost everything and still chose honesty over lies, dignity over bitterness, kindness over pride. She loved his daughter. She gave without asking for anything in return. He had been wrong, deeply wrong, and he would fix it. Tomorrow he would speak. Tonight he returned to the barn and carved until dawn. He shaped delicate leaves on the wooden flower. He polished it until his hands were sore. Then he opened a small box. Inside was a simple ring Sarah's mother had once worn. Sarah had left a note for him. "For the next woman worthy of your heart." By sunrise, the coldest winter inside him had begun to break. Morning light filled the cabin as Eli stood at the stove preparing breakfast. The fire glowed steady, coffee steamed, eggs sizzled in the pan. He worked with a focus he had not felt in years. When Margaret stepped softly into the doorway, she stopped in surprise. "Mr. Mercer," she said quietly. "Please sit," he told her. "Breakfast is ready." She hesitated before taking her seat. Her posture was calm, but her eyes carried the weight of days spent wondering what she had done wrong. Eli took a deep breath and sat across from her, his hands steadying on the table. "Margaret," he said, and saw her tense. "I owe you an apology." She stayed silent, waiting. "When you arrived, I saw your rags before I saw your courage. When folks in town judged you, I let their words poison my thinking. I let doubt speak louder than truth." Margaret looked down for a moment, then met his eyes again. He reached into his pocket and placed the wooden flower on the table. It shone smooth from hours of careful carving. Next he set down a small box. "I watched you these past weeks," he said. "You cared for my daughter like she was your own. You held yourself with dignity even when life gave you little. You honored this home with your honesty. You showed courage when most would have hidden their truth." He opened the box. Inside lay the simple ring. This ring belonged to my wife's mother. Sarah left a note saying it should go to the next woman worthy of my heart. Margaret's breath caught. Tears brimmed in her eyes. "I choose you, Margaret," Eli said softly. "Not because of what you own, but because of who you are, not out of duty, not out of fear. I choose you because your worth has nothing to do with circumstance. You lost everything and still kept your honor. That is rare. That is precious." He reached across the table and took her hand. It was warm and trembling. "Will you stay?" Not as an arrangement, not as a burden, as family, as someone chosen. Margaret's tears fell freely now. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Yes, yes, Eli, I will stay. And I will spend every day proving your trust is well placed." Her words were full of truth and relief. For the first time since she had stepped off that stagecoach in rags, someone saw her wholly and honored her fully. At that moment, small footsteps came rushing down the hall. Hannah burst into the kitchen with wide eyes. "Papa, Miss Margaret, does this mean she is staying forever? Does this mean she will be my—" She stopped, afraid to finish. Margaret opened her arms. Hannah flew into them. "I am staying, little bird," Margaret said gently. "I am staying." Hannah cried with joy and held her tight. She reached for Eli with her free hand, pulling him into their embrace. Eli wrapped his arms around both of them. The three of them stood together while sunlight streamed through the window. After 2 years of silence and sorrow, Eli felt his heart thaw. He felt at hope again. Sunday came cold and bright. Eli helped Margaret into the wagon. Her dress was still threadbare, but she stood tall. He had offered to buy her new clothes, but she refused. "Let them see who you chose," she said. "Let the truth be enough." Hannah sat between them, holding both their hands. The horses trotted through the snow toward the church. When they entered, people turned to stare. Whispers rose. Judgments hovered. After the service, Widow Carson approached with her sharp smile. "Eli, dear, so good to see your new arrangement." Eli straightened. "Mrs. Carson," he said clearly, "I would like you to meet my intended wife, Margaret." A hush fell around them. "She came to me with nothing but her character," he continued. "And that is worth more than any fortune. If this town measures worth by money before honesty, then this town has much to learn." Mr. Thompson, the blacksmith, stepped forward and tipped his hat to Margaret. "Well said, Mercer. We are honored to welcome you." Others followed. The banker's wife shook Margaret's hand. The Reverend offered blessings. One by one, the crowd shifted. Gossip faded. Respect took its place. The ride home was peaceful. Hannah chattered happily. Margaret and Eli exchanged quiet glances filled with something warm and steady. When they reached the cabin, something caught Eli's eye. He stopped the wagon. Hannah jumped down first. "Papa, Mama's flowers," she whispered. Purple and gold crocuses were pushing up through the snow by the doorstep. Sarah's flowers. They had survived the winter. They had waited in the cold for warmth to return. Margaret knelt beside Hannah. "Flowers do not bloom until they feel safe again," she said softly. "Until someone gives them enough warmth to rise." Eli understood. Hope had been buried, but not gone. Love had been resting beneath the surface, waiting for courage to open the door. He offered his hand to Margaret. She took it, her eyes full of trust. "Welcome home, Margaret," he said. Her smile broke through every shadow. "I believe I am home, Eli, truly home." Hannah took both their hands and led them toward the cabin. The three stepped across the threshold together. Inside, the fire burned bright. The wooden flower stood beside Sarah's Bible, old love honoring new. Outside, winter sun lit the land with golden promise. The crocuses stood strong and bright against the snow, signs of the spring to come. Through the window, their three silhouettes moved around the warm cabin, filling it with laughter. Where there had been two, now there were three. Where there had been brokenness, now there was wholeness. Where winter had once ruled, warmth had finally returned. Eli had opened his door, and Love, carrying nothing but honesty and worn fabric, had walked right in.